Victoria's luxury car sits in her driveway, engine dead. She's already late for her appointment. A man appears, Emmanuel, the gardener, and he offers to help. She looks at him with pure disdain and says the words that will change everything. "How dare you attempt to touch that car? Do you know that this car can buy you and your entire generation?" She turns away, dismissing him completely. But what she doesn't know is that this moment, this rejection, is the beginning of the only thing money can never buy: her humanity. If you're ready for real love stories, subscribe now and don't miss what happens next. Victoria Ashford is a woman who you do not want to mess with. She's rude, very rude, controlling, but to her, she's just making sure nobody messes with her anymore. She stepped out of her penthouse onto the driveway, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision. The morning sun caught the edges of her designer suit as she checked her phone. 7:47 a.m. She was already 13 minutes behind schedule, and in her world, 13 minutes meant lost deals, lost respect, lost control. She couldn't afford either. Her silver Mercedes G-Wagon sat waiting, gleaming like a trophy. She bought it 2 years ago when she closed her first major real estate development deal. It was more than transportation. It was proof. Proof that a woman from nothing could build an empire. Proof that she'd made the right choice all those years ago when she decided that kindness was a luxury only the weak could afford. Victoria slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. Nothing. She tried again. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. Again, still nothing. Her jaw tightened. She sat back, hands gripping the steering wheel, and took a breath. This shouldn't be happening. Not today, she said. A shadow fell across the windshield. She looked up to see Emmanuel standing there, gardening shears in one hand, his work shirt dusty from the morning's labor. He was the new hire, some man the estate manager had brought in last week. Victoria barely remembered hearing him. She barely remembered anything that didn't involve spreadsheets and property portfolios. "Excuse me," Emmanuel said, his Nigerian accent gentle and careful. "I think your battery might be." "How dare you attempt to touch that car?" Victoria's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. She stepped out, positioning herself between him and the vehicle. "Do you know that car can buy you and your entire generation?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same tone she used in boardrooms when she wanted to remind people of the distance between them. Emmanuel stepped back, his expression unchanged. He wasn't offended, that was the strange thing. He just looked at her the way someone might look at a child throwing a tantrum, with a kind of sad understanding. "I was only trying to help," he said quietly. "I don't need your help," Victoria snapped. She pulled out her phone and dialed estate management. "This is Victoria. My car won't start. Send someone immediately." She hung up without waiting for a response and turned back to Emmanuel. "You can go back to your hedges." He nodded, set down his shears, and walked away without another word. Victoria watched him go, feeling the familiar rush of control settle back into her chest. That was how you handled people. You reminded them of their place. You never let them close enough to hurt you. She learned that lesson years ago, and it had served her well. The real estate office was in chaos when she arrived 40 minutes later in a company car. Her assistant, Marcus, jumped to his feet the moment she walked through the door. He'd only been working for her for 3 weeks, and already he had the nervous energy of someone walking through a minefield. "Morning meeting is in 5, Marcus said, handing her a coffee she didn't ask for. "The Riverside Project." "I know what the Riverside Project is," Victoria interrupted, pushing past him toward her office. Inside, she set down her bag and checked her emails. 43 new messages. She scanned them quickly, mentally calculating responses, timelines, leverage points. The meeting was brutal. A contractor had underestimated costs on the Riverside development. It would either come out of his pocket or out of the timeline. Victoria made it clear which option she preferred. When he suggested they might work together to find a middle ground, she laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "No," she said simply, You made a mistake, you fix it. By lunch, he'd agreed to absorb the costs. By 2 p.m., Victoria had closed another deal, a downtown property that 3 other developers had passed on. She saw opportunity where others saw risk. She saw profit where others saw problems. It was why she was brilliant, and it was why she was alone. She ate lunch at her desk. By 5 p.m., her team had stopped making eye contact with her. By 6 p.m., they'd all found reasons to leave early. By 7 p.m., Victoria was still there, the last person in the office, reviewing contracts under fluorescent lights. This was her life now. This was what she'd chosen when she decided that power was safer than love, that control was more reliable than trust. She didn't think about a manual again until the next few days. The car started fine that day. It started fine for 3 more days after that. Victoria fell back into her rhythm. Early mornings, brutal meetings, late nights, spreadsheets, phone calls, deals. The gardener became background noise again, visible only in the neatly trimmed hedges and the flowers that somehow never died around her penthouse. On Friday, she was running even later than usual. She'd been on a call with a developer in Tokyo until 2 a.m. and she'd only slept 3 hours. Her head pounded. Her eyes burned. She forced herself into the shower, into her suit, into the car. She had a presentation at 8 a.m. for a $50 million mixed-use development. Missing it wasn't an option. The car wouldn't start. Victoria sat there, hands shaking slightly, whether from exhaustion or frustration she couldn't tell. She tried again. Dead. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and closed her eyes. This wasn't just a delay. This was a setback. This was a loss of control. She looked up and saw Emmanuel through the windshield again. He was standing near the hedge line, watching her. Their eyes met for a moment. He didn't move toward the car this time. He just waited as if he knew that she might ask or she might not. Victoria sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of her own exhaustion and something else, something that felt dangerously close to loneliness. She thought about yesterday's meeting, where her team had flinched at her tone. She thought about Marcus, who'd stopped offering suggestions weeks ago because she'd shut him down too many times. She thought about the last time someone had genuinely smiled at her without fear in their eyes. Then she opened the car door. "Can you please drive me to work?" The words felt strange in her mouth, unfamiliar and fragile. She wasn't commanding. She was asking. There was a difference, and it terrified her. Emmanuel nodded simply, "Of course." He didn't smile or make her feel like she'd done something remarkable. He just accepted the request like it was the most natural thing in the world. He went inside to wash his hands and grabbed his keys. Emmanuel's truck was nothing like Victoria's car. He drove an old Toyota Hilux truck. It was practical, worn, with a cassette player and seats that had seen years of use. As he drove, the morning traffic moved slowly around them, and Victoria found herself staring out the window at a city she'd lived in for 5 years but never really seen. "You're not feeling well," Emmanuel said. It wasn't a question. "I'm fine," Victoria replied automatically, then caught herself. The lie felt heavy. "I didn't sleep much." "Too much work." She almost deflected again, but something in his voice, the genuine concern without judgment, made her pause. "Yes, too much work. Always too much work." Emmanuel was quiet for a moment, navigating through traffic with an ease that suggested he wasn't in a rush and wasn't anxious about being late or losing time. It was a rhythm Victoria had forgotten existed. "How did you learn to fix cars?" she asked suddenly. He glanced at her, surprised by the question. "I'm a mechanical engineer, or I was supposed to be." Victoria turned to look at him fully. "Supposed to be." "I came from Nigeria to study engineering, graduated with honors." He said it without bitterness, just stating facts. "But after graduation, I couldn't get certified without money I didn't have. No connections, no resources. The jobs wanted experience I couldn't get without the certifications. It's a circle." "So you became a gardener." Victoria said, understanding the practicality but not the acceptance in his voice. I became a gardener, he confirmed. It's honest work, it pays, but it's not my dream. She watched him for a long moment. He was maybe 30, 31. He had kind eyes and hands that were strong but gentle. He could have been bitter. He could have blamed the system, blamed his circumstances, blamed people like her. Instead, he'd simply adapted. He'd taken what was available and made peace with it. "Why did you offer to help my car that first day?" Victoria asked. "You knew I would reject you." "Because helping people is who I am," Emmanuel said simply, "whether they want it or not." The words sat between them, quiet but heavy with meaning. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, a crack in a wall she'd built so carefully, brick by brick, rejection by rejection, betrayal by betrayal. "Someone hurt you," Emmanuel said. It wasn't a question either. Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. No one asked her about that. No one cared enough to ask. But somehow, in the safety of this old truck with a man who had nothing to gain from her, the story spilled out. She told him about Thomas, the business partner who'd been her friend first. They built something together from nothing. And then one day, he'd made a move on a development deal without her, stolen her investors, and walked away with half of what should have been hers. It had taken her years to recover, years of working 70-hour weeks to rebuild what he'd taken. After that, Victoria said quietly, I learned that kindness was a weapon. If you were kind to people, they used it against you. If you were warm, they assumed you were weak. The only way to survive was to be colder than everyone else. Meaner, harder. And did that work? Emmanuel asked. Victoria thought about her office, her empire, her empty penthouse, the fact that no one on her team wanted to work for her personally, the way people flinched when she entered a room. It worked for business. But not for you, Emmanuel said gently. She didn't answer because she couldn't. The truth was too close to the surface now, and she was afraid if she acknowledged it, she might break completely. They drove in silence for the rest of the way. Emmanuel pulled up to her office building, and Victoria sat for a moment before unbuckling her seatbelt. Thank you, she said, for driving me, for listening. You're welcome, Emmanuel replied. Do you want me to pick you up this evening? Victoria hesitated, and in that hesitation she made a choice. Yes, if you don't mind. Over the next few weeks, Emmanuel drove her to work every morning. They talked about his engineering dreams, about projects he wanted to build, about the frustration of having talent but no pathway forward. Victoria listened, not with the calculating part of her brain that measured people's usefulness, but with something older and softer that she thought she'd buried years ago. She began to notice things. The way he treated people, the coffee shop barista, the parking attendant, the security guard at her building, with genuine interest and respect. The way he never complained about his circumstances. The way he looked at her, not with the fear and distance everyone else maintained, but with something that looked like hope. One evening, after he'd driven her home, she asked him inside. They sat in her penthouse, surrounded by expensive furniture that had never felt like home, and she found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone. About the childhood that made her hungry for control. About the fear that if she stopped moving, stopped winning, stopped dominating, she would disappear. Emmanuel listened, and when she finished, he didn't try to fix her or minimize her pain. He simply said, You're not going to disappear. You're stronger than that. But strength, Victoria was beginning to understand, wasn't what she'd thought it was. It was 2 months into their routine. They got reasonably close, and she started learning a few of his Nigerian slangs. She offered him a job. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, watching him work on her estate, knowing that his talent was being wasted, that he deserved better. I want you to head the engineering division, she said. They were in her kitchen, evening light streaming through the windows. Real salary, real title. Your dreams are too big to stay in a garden. Emmanuel went very still. No, he said quietly. Victoria felt the rejection like a physical blow. "No." "I'm scared," he said, and his honesty cut through her. "I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and flip. You'll go back to who you were. You'll fire me because I made a mistake or because you're having a bad day, and I'll lose everything and have to start all over again." The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in her. She realized what he was really saying. He wasn't rejecting the job. He was protecting his heart. "Can I be honest too?" Victoria whispered. "I don't even want you to work for me. I'm beginning to see you differently. I'm falling for you, and I don't want to lose you either." Emmanuel stepped closer. "Victoria." "I'm terrified," she continued. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to not protect myself. But when I'm with you, I want to try." He kissed her then, and it felt like forgiveness. For all the walls she'd built, for all the people she'd hurt, for all the years she'd chosen power over love. When they pulled apart, tears were streaming down her face. "I want to work with you," Emmanuel said. "Not for you, with you, as partners." Victoria nodded, unable to speak. Weeks later, Emmanuel was working in her real estate company, not as an employee but as a partner. And on an afternoon when he was under her car, fixing something just because he loved fixing things, Victoria watched him and smiled. The car that had once separated them had become the thing that brought them together. "You know," she said as he slid out from underneath, "Sheba, you know that car could still buy you and small of your entire generation now." Emmanuel stood, wiping his hands, and pulled her close. "Even though, who cares? I don't care about the car. I never did. I care about you. I always did." They stood together in the driveway where it had all begun, and Victoria realized that the richest thing she'd ever built wasn't made of brick or steel. It was built on truth, on vulnerability, on the courage to let someone in. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and comment. Share your comments too. Do you think she was right to let him into her life, or she was better off without him? Thank you for watching.